Right, good morning everybody. Can you all hear me okay? I'll just make sure I'm in the right place. Okay, that's good. Diane, I must thank for that exceptional introduction. That gives really good context, and hopefully people will be able to make the link between the energy part of the equation and the overall picture that government's painted for us. So thank you very much for that. Right, so energy, a key part of the transition that we need to tackle global climate change. So first, a quick reminder where we are for greenhouse gas emissions in Hong Kong. So Diane mentioned the peak was in 2014, indeed the case. Looking at the latest figures from government, 2022, you can see there has been a reduction of around about a quarter as a whole. You can see on the chart on the left how that is made up. Largely, it's down to electricity generation, but transport and other sectors also play a key role. Most of the change, though, since 2014 has been in electricity generation. The other sectors have not moved very much. On the right-hand side is a chart that shows the carbon intensity of CLP's electricity supply. And as you heard from Diane, Hong Kong does not do too badly. Now, I don't want to be complacent. We've got a lot more work to do. But when you compare us with some of our neighbors, South Korea, Singapore, and so on, you can see the performance is pretty reasonable. Now, this is government's climate action plan for 2050, published in 2021. There are two key timelines, 2035 and 2050. 2050 is carbon neutrality, but 2035 has a series of goals to make sure that we take good progress to partway meet those longer-term targets. So in 2035, for energy, 60 to 70% of our supply has to be zero carbon. And there also has to be around 7.5% or a little bit more of RE as a target for that 2035 horizon. So what does that mean for us and for you, because many of you in this room are my customers, in terms of supply-side decarbonisation? Now, on the chart, you can see on the left-hand side, I've put our carbon intensity in kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. Benchmark year 2005, 2020, 2035, 2050. So 15-year intervals, you can see the change. So 2020, 0.37. You can see by 2035, our expectation is 0.12 to 0.16. Now those are public numbers. You can work them back from the Climate Action Plan. 60 to 70% of electricity has to be zero carbon. We're not going to use coal for daily electricity generation, so the balance is likely to be gas. Gas has a particular carbon emissions factor when you burn it in a combined cycle turbine. Those numbers are in our sustainability report. If you do the maths, you can see that actually CLP's electricity supply carbon intensity will drop significantly between 2020 and 2035. Now, I'm confident that that can be delivered. And that is good news for the airport authority, for the MTR, for the major customers that we got in the room. But I don't want us to be complacent that I'm going to do all the heavy lifting for you, because you also have to play your part. So on the supply side, what are we actually going to do to see that drop in carbon intensity? Well, we're already making good progress in replacing coal with natural gas. So for CLP, coal's only now about 15, 16, 70% of our generation mix. We are already moving forward with distributed renewable energy. So the feed-in tariff scheme, for example, that we have in CLP's area, it's about 1% of our energy requirement today. Small number, but better than no percent. Regional cooperation we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, I'm sure, as we get to the panel discussion. But like all major cities, Hong Kong relies on its hinterland for many things. Water, food, many, many things. And electricity will be no different. On the renewable and zero carbon energy front, we expect hydrogen, zero carbon hydrogen, because only if hydrogen is zero carbon does the planet consider it green, to replace natural gas. Natural gas around the world is seen as an interim fuel. Energy storage is important as we bring in more utility-scale renewable energy into the system so that we can balance it. So more natural gas, more RE locally where we can do it, regional cooperation, some RE, energy storage, and green hydrogen in the longer term. Now, just a broader concept in terms of Hong Kong's energy. This is not Saudi Arabia. We don't sit on a lot of indigenous energy reserves. We have very limited opportunity to create our own fuels for the energy transition. We have limited land. Most of the developable land is for commercial and residential use. So we import almost all of the energy that we need. But I said, like most major cities, we need to work with our hinterland. London, Paris, Sydney, New York, they all rely on their hinterland for energy supplies. Now, the mainland has its own 30-60 targets, and it doesn't have a lot of spare energy resources either. In Hong Kong, over the last 10 years, from the government stats I looked at last week, our per capita energy end use, Diane showed you, the carbon content has reduced, but the amount of energy we use has hardly dropped at all over the last 10 years. So can we change our behavior? Can we reduce our demand? Now, most of the audience in front of me today are business people. They're from businesses. Businesses buy energy to do useful work. Increasingly, they are accountable for the emissions from those purchases. So can we increase the efficiency with which that energy that's been purchased and is held accountable against your particular company's ESG targets is used? I think we can. So, do you have a commercial building? We're sat in one today. Most of you will have commercial buildings in your operation. So have you got the best practice chillers in place? HVAC is typically maybe 45-50% of a total building energy consumption. If you use the latest chillers, you can save 30% of that. So maybe all up about 15% of the building's consumption. Water-cooled, not air-cooled, and use VSD. If you're running a hotel, surprise, surprise, somebody here must be running a hotel, can you use a heat pump to heat that water? At 60% less energy than a conventional boiler. It takes waste heat, waste being the operative word, from the outside air. Applications in hotels and hospitals. Are you running a restaurant? I guess some of us are going to have lunch, and that'll be cooked in a restaurant. Are we using the energy to cook that food by putting the energy directly from the induction cooker into the food, or are we using a less efficient method? And then finally, I often get asked, can I generate RE in Hong Kong, electrolyze water, and provide hydrogen? Well, yes, I could. But if you look at the end-to-end energy process, it is actually quite inefficient. If I can generate RE in Hong Kong, I'd much rather put it into the grid and have a direct impact straight away. An electric motor is incredibly efficient in terms of driving vehicles forward. Now, that technology exists today. Just outside, we have double-decker green buses running on electricity already. We have lots and lots of electric vehicles. In fact, Hong Kong had one of the highest sales rates anywhere in the world last year. So there are things that we can do today where the climate really needs help today, and we should take advantage of those opportunities. So please use your energy wisely. Think about the end-to-end process and think about how you can change behavior and use less. While you're doing that, I'm going to be really busy getting the supply side sorted out. Only if we work together can we get there. So that, I hope, sets a little bit of context for our discussions this morning. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Please be seated. May I now invite our next speaker, Mr. Justin Wu, Managing Director and Co-Head of Climate Change Asia Pacific of HSBC, to deliver his presentation. Mr. Wu, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Jim, I will be thinking about my energy use as I give this presentation and live a daily life. So thank you very much for this opportunity to stand here before you today to give a presentation. I think Jim gave a really good overview of what's happening in Hong Kong. So what I'll try to do is talk a little bit about HSBC, what we're doing in terms of our net zero and climate goals. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor of sort of how banks or financial institutions and the role that we might play in this, right? Sort of how do we think about it? And also give you a little more of a regional context across the Asia-Pacific region in terms of where things are in the energy transition. So let's start with HSBC, right? So the core of our climate or net zero commitments are really around two main areas, the first two. One is, of course, in our net zero aligned sort of financed emissions by 2050. So this is the money, essentially the money that we lend to our customers, right, need to be sort of aligned by to net zero by 2050. Because obviously as a bank, we have our own pledge to achieve net zero emissions by 2030 in our own sort of supply chain, but we don't really consume a lot compared to obviously the lending that we do. So that part is the most important one. And to do that, actually, we have an interim target by 2030 around finance emissions, specifically around 6 sectors of the economy. And on the right-hand side, you can see an example of the power utilities sector, which we want to sort of bring down the finance emissions of that. So far, it's come down about 23% since 2019, but we want to bring that down even further in 2030. So this is sort of the core of what we're trying to do. The lending that we want to do, our customers, what they do with the money that they lend from us, that needs to sort of be aligned to net zero. And then the second part is sort of the, some of the enabling factors, some of the tools that we want to deploy, right? Part of which is to facilitate and provide sustainable finance and investment, of which there's a goal by 2030. And also to look at the next generation of climate tech offerings, right? So we have a lot of the technologies that we need today to sort of get us a good amount of the way towards net zero, but we don't have all of it. A lot of it still is sort of in pre-commercial stage, and we need to sort of scale that up. And then, of course, to help us do that, we have a net zero transition plan and supportive policies to achieve that. And the plan is really what kind of holds it together. This is on our public website, so please go take a look. Now I think a lot of banks and financial institutions, including a lot of regulators, are requiring that we publish transition plans, right? It's one thing that we ask our clients to do this, but we obviously need to have one ourselves. But along the way, the things that we sort of highlight here is how do we intend to use our strengths to make financing, facilitation, investment choices that actually have an impact on the real economy. And one of the things we say is actually that we need to transition our customers, right? It's not just our balance sheet, but actually how do we work with our customers to make sure that they actually have valid transition plans to kind of move from one direction to the other. Sector transitions actually paints a picture of what net zero could look like in 2050. I think for most of us, it's very difficult to imagine, right, what the future looks like in terms of a net zero economy, right? What are the technologies that need to be employed? You hear about a lot of different things out there, right? What needs to happen sort of in this sequence? What do we need to do first, second, third, et cetera? So this is sort of the picture that we want to paint, and also acknowledge some of the how we actually have to transform ourselves. And there's a lot of work essentially to be done within that as well. So one of these pictures in our plan, and actually I think this reflects what's happening in the real world as well, is how much capital expenditure do we actually need to achieve net zero by 2050, right? Essentially it's a two-stage process. So one, sort of the near term by 2030, and you can see here half of that is actually in the Asia-Pacific region, right? About 49% of the $39 trillion US dollars that we need by 2030. And then, about $116 trillion of energy transition investment needed between 2031 and 2050, of which, again, half of it is needed in the Asia-Pacific region. So, if there's one takeaway message, there's a lot of investment that's needed to achieve this goal, and half of that actually needs to happen in Asia. So at this point, let me just paint a little bit of a picture of what's been happening in the region so far, right? So are we at a point where Asia is actually contributing half of all the investment needed for energy transition? The answer actually is yes, and more than half. Actually, for over 10 years, you see the red bar on this chart. This is all the energy transition investment in the world, about $1.8 trillion last year. Almost 60% of that was in the Asia-Pacific region. So Asia already is a leading region in terms of investment in energy transition. However, there's a little more to this story than this chart might tell you. And the thing is that actually the vast majority of that is only in one country, which is China. China actually takes the lion's share of this portion. And if you add China, the US, and Europe, actually that's almost 90% of all energy transition investment in the world. So there's a big question about how the rest of Asia, particularly emerging markets in Southeast Asia or South Asia, how do we get more investment? How do we deploy more in those places? Jim also mentioned in his presentation sort of two of these more mature technologies that need to be deployed now, which is around renewable energy and electrification of transport, electric vehicles. And you can see here that actually the blue and the green on the chart highlight that these are the two areas of which receive the most amount of investment, are these two sort of technologies. Now, actually, we've seen one of the reasons that we've seen so much investment in clean energy is actually the cost of these technologies has been falling rapidly. And a lot of that learning has taken place actually just across the border north of us in mainland China. We see, solar modules, onshore wind turbines, lithium-ion battery packs that go into electric vehicles, the cost of which are dropping rapidly thanks to, innovation and also scale up in manufacturing capacity. Again, a lot of that, 80% of all that capacity is happening in China. And what that actually does is that, as the equipment or the prices of these equipment are falling, you see that actually they make these technologies a lot more cost competitive compared to traditional technologies such as fossil fuels, such as coal or even natural gas. So even in emerging countries like Indonesia and Vietnam, which often are seen at sort of the frontiers of deploying renewable energy, we already see either solar or wind becoming more competitive, more cost competitive than gas or coal, either now or in the near future. But there's one big problem, and maybe this is why that we may need to think about this a little more carefully. Although technology costs have fallen, the capital cost, the cost of capital, has not in a lot of these emerging markets. So this is from the International Energy Agency, but one of the surveys found that although in advanced economies, the cost of capital for a solar or battery storage project is maybe 5 or 6% on average, but they could be more than double in an emerging market. So there's a question for us, maybe as a bank, but maybe for all of us, is how do we bring this down, right? Why do we have this sort of gap in terms of pricing and the cost of capital? And the second bit is actually a bit of distortion in the market in terms of subsidies for fossil fuels, whether direct or indirect. So in these countries, often in emerging markets, a good proportion of subsidy still goes into fossil fuels such as coal or gas, making them cheaper than they actually seem and actually not allowing renewable energy to achieve their potential. So again, this is an area that is maybe beyond finance, but it's definitely a system-wide sort of issue that needs to be looked at very carefully. Nevertheless, we see that renewable energy has scaled in many of these countries, and as I mentioned before, China is actually a leading example of this, right? Almost 35% or more of its electricity is coming now from renewables. Same with India and Japan have seen actually quite a bit of progress over the last 10, 15 years. But Southeast Asia, again, for some of the reasons that I mentioned before, fossil fuel subsidies, cost of capital, and other issues, actually has seen renewable energy as a proportion of its electricity decrease in the last 10 years. Although, these countries are growing, so at an absolute level, they're increasing, but as a proportion, they're decreasing. And obviously, as we try to get to net zero and scale our climate targets, this is not quite enough. So the final message I just want to leave you is that, whether we as a bank or others talk to clients, one of the things that we want to think about is ambition, right? How do we raise the ambition of whether it's governments or companies with their transition plans and others? So maybe on a positive note, if you actually look at this is just an example of the climate or net zero positions of the major Southeast Asian countries. You'll notice that 3 of them, Singapore, Malaysia, and Vietnam, is 2050. The 2 that are not, Thailand, Indonesia, 2060 or 65, all have a conditional portion that says with enough financial or technical assistance, they can bring that forward to 2050. So it gives a little bit of hope that with engagement and assistance of some sort of form, tackling some of the issues that I mentioned before, we could sort of raise the ambition of these countries as well in the region. And perhaps I think the final thing to think about is, what about the role of China and Hong Kong in terms of playing a role in this? If we are already having good ideas, a leading position in some of these climate technologies, can we play a role to help some of the rest of Asia raise ambition and sort of achieve its targets? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. Now, may I invite our moderator of this session, Ms. Olivia To, Senior Vice President, Carbon Neutrality, Technology, Innovation and Entrepreneurship of Invest Hong Kong. And our panelist, Mr. Jim Taylor, Senior Director, Planning and Development of CLP Power Hong Kong Limited. Mr. Justin Wu, Managing Director, Co-Head, Climate Change Asia Pacific of HSBC. Mr. Jasper Chen, Assistant General Manager, ESG of the Hong Kong and China Gas Company Limited, and Mr. David Fishman, Senior Manager of the Lantau Group, to the stage for the panel discussion. Ms. To, over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the introductions, and also good morning, everyone. It's a brilliant opportunities that, and also I'm actually very excited for today's panel discussions, because we're going to talk about very important and timely topic about energy transitions in Hong Kong, and more broadly about the regional collaborations or the importance of regional effort when we talk about the energy transitions. So I'm Olivia To. I work with Invest Hong Kong, which is a government department. Our goal is trying to facilitate the overseas investment coming to Hong Kong. And more recently, because of the climate goals, as well as the carbon neutrality goals in Hong Kong, we are putting more efforts trying to attract the overseas, particularly on green technologies companies coming to Hong Kong. So today with me, we have really brilliant panel settings that I would like to spend a minute to introduce our panelists. On my left, we have Jim Taylor. He is the Senior Director of Planning and Development at CLP Power Companies. Jim has been working with the China Light and Powers in Hong Kong since 2001, responsible for supporting the company's long-term strategy development and also the regulatory regimes. Jim also has extensive senior management experience of electricity, gas, and also environmental issues with leading companies in both regulated and deregulated energy market in the UK and also Australia. So welcome, Jim. And also we have Justin. Justin just mentioned about a lot of different efforts and also the focus area of HSBC right now looking into. So he is now the Managing Director and Co-Head of the Climate Change Asia Pacific at HSBC. Justin oversees the development and the implementations of the group climate ambitions across the regions. He's also the senior expert and ambassadors for HSBC on climate change in the Asian context, leading on engagement with the bank clients, regulators, and also other stakeholders. Previously, Justin was the head of the Asia Pacific of Bloomberg and NEF. Welcome, Justin. We also have Jasper Chen. He is from Town Gas. He's right now the Assistant General Manager of ESGs with the Hong Kong and China gas companies. Jasper has more than 12 years of experience in Town Gas and leading a team based in Hong Kong and Beijing to drive the group ESG strategies and development. He also specializing in the green energy applications, carbon neutrality strategies, and also climate resilience. Justin is currently the steering committee at the BEC Sustainable Living Environment Advisory Group. And last but not least, we have David Fishman. David is now the senior manager at the Lantau Group, an economic consultancy focused on energies and electricities in the Asia Pacific. His areas of focus covering the regulatory and economic intelligence for Chinese power sectors, including rivers of renewable energies, solar, and also wind, hydros, and also some of the other energies, including the coal and also power market. So his projects experience include Chinese power market and also policy intelligence, including the forecasting, an area of solar and wind tariff policies. So welcome all of our panelists, and also very excited to see all of us here in this morning joining today's panel discussions. Just to remind you, after this panel discussions, we'll have about 8 minutes to 10 minutes. The clock is ticking to take a few of Q&A questions, okay? So today's discussions is really about the energy transitions, and also the because we are talking about the stock takings, and COP, Diane mentioned about we have many of commitment that we made, and the consensus that about the UAE consensus is really important because it's highlight about the global commitment of the energy transitions away from the fossil fuels and more on the just orderly and also equitable manners of the energy transitions. So it basically defined about the framework or redefining about the framework of 1.5 degrees Celsius that we have to keep that target on in mind. But it also about the diverse energy sources of their economies and also countries to meet not only about different kind of energy resources, but also to commit on renewable energy targets. So Hong Kong targets is we're going to have our emissions by 2035, and also Jim mentioned about we have to have about 60 to 70% of net zero energies by 2035 as well. So let's jump right in, because I remember Diane and also Jim mentioned about the regional collaborations is really important for Hong Kong to moving forward regarding having more energy resources. So Jim, what is your take about regional collaborations, particularly on the net zero energy sources? Because we basically in Hong Kong just lack of this kind of raw materials or resources in Hong Kong. So what is your take? And also, do you identify, if that is important, what kind of barriers and opportunities you see in this ambit?
Right, good question. If I were to ask the audience today, how many of these light bulbs above us in the ceiling are already zero carbon, what would you say? The answer is 1 in 3 is already zero carbon. And that is exactly because of regional cooperation. They're fed by Daya Bay today. They're already zero carbon. So there are very good precedents. As I said, many international cities will work with their hinterlands to try and look at how to optimize resources across the boundaries that they face. So for us, the opportunities are, we've already got good precedents. We have the opportunity to tap into the mainland's zero carbon sources. But I don't really want to just sort of rob Peter to pay Paul. So we have to do it in a way where there's some genuine additionality as part of the process. The supply has to be reliable. It has to be at a reasonable cost. That's the expectation that our customers have. But I think that's possible. There is a very good precedent. Daya Bay, 1994. 1/3 of CLP's electricity supply. It's been very steady, it's been very reliable. And if you look back through the energy crisis that we had in 2022 at a very low price. So I think there are good precedents. There's one major challenge. That's over there, and we're over here. So I've physically got to get the energy into Hong Kong, because we can't produce it locally. So that will be a challenge. That's about an 8 to 10 year process. So 2035 work back. I would look forward to some new announcements from government in the next sort of 12 to 18 months about the details to actually firm up the opportunity for more zero carbon energy supplies from the mainland. But I think good precedent works today, quite comfortable.
Okay. So in the coming 8 to 10 years, maybe we foresee some of the challenges. So, but I think, David, because you're looking after a lot of electricity market as well, you know well about the China market and also regional market. What is your take about the regional collaborations? Do you agree or disagree of Jim, what just mentioned?
Well, I don't know how I would disagree, because I don't think I have quite the platitude to be able to disagree on such a thing. But yeah, of course, you'll have more options than you've had recently, right? We have Taipingling coming online, we have Lufeng coming online. These are all mainland Guangdong-based nuclear power plants where you might have the ability to participate, or farther out through cooperation with Southern Grid and China General Nuclear, you'll have many more options that might fall into that additionality realm, where you could say, because of Hong Kong's purchase, because of our PPA with that plant was able to come into existence, right? And everybody feels good about that it had an additional component to it. It wasn't just robbing Peter to pay Paul and moving shells around maybe. And that's where things are going, of course. The planned build-out for new nuclear in Guangdong is massive. Actually, the planned build-out for new zero carbon in Guangdong is massive. It doesn't have to be just nuclear, although obviously that's a low-hanging fruit. It's happened before. It should and could certainly happen again. But why not also offshore wind, for example? Major developments, offshore wind all along Guangdong's coast, perhaps some floating solar, perhaps even some inland solar if you can figure out how to get it through the wires and get it down to Hong Kong. Many opportunities that will be possible there. And again, as you pointed out, siting that line, an 8 to 10 year process, siting and then building it, right? And to get from an expectation of how big that line needs to be and how big it needs to be in 10 years, and all of that is a monumental amount of work, I understand and appreciate. And then also pricing the power, right? Pricing the power so that everybody involved feels good about it, from the customer who has to actually pay for it, to the transmitter of the power, to the generator of the power, and the buyer of the power, that everybody feels good about it. Another massive, monumental undertaking for something that will be done in 12 years, or 15 years, or 20 years. Trying to price that, I appreciate that I get to play a very small role in that kind of world, but I appreciate that I don't have to take the lead role in that world. So, thank you.
I see. I like it. I really like it, because we jump right in about talking about the future fuel mix of Hong Kong. We mentioned about the nuclear already, as well as the renewables upcoming in Hong Kong, and the importance of it, some of the challenge. But I think because hydrogen has been talking a lot recently, and then we have Jasper here sitting with us. Your company has been putting a lot of effort for supplying the natural gas to Hong Kong. How do you, talk about regional collaborations, how do you project, or what is your anticipated transitioning to cleaner energy sources from moving natural gases to green hydrogens? Can you share more of this?
Thank you, Olivia. I have to say that, when this hotel, called this hotel, is using town gas, not a lot of people know that half of the gas is already using hydrogen and 30% of it is natural gas. So Hong Kong is a very unique place where hydrogen already plays a major role in the gas system. So we already get the gas supply, we already get gas applications as well. So like in your home or in this hotel, when they are using the stove, half of it is already hydrogen. So that is a big part for it. Looking where we take into account of the hydrogen development. Of course, when we ask our customers, okay, a lot of you have transition plans, a lot of you has the SBT, a lot of you have very aggressive targets. How much you want the power or energy or gas company to help you? Of course, most of them would say, if you can just decarbonize just energy supply from your side 100%, then probably we don't need to do anything, right? We can enjoy the so good world as of today. But the problem is it's just not realistic at this moment. So for town gas, actually 2 months ago, when we published the ESG report, we actually published a target as well, which is on par with Hong Kong's zero carbon energy target in 2035, which actually also means that for now, the hydrogen production in town gas is very low carbon already. For now, if we use town gas, it is 230 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour, which is much lower than the average in China as well as in Hong Kong. So as long as you are using town gas or the hydrogen inside, it is already lower at this moment, already lower. And I like the presentation just now. for the solar power over the last 2 decades, the cost has gone down by more than 90%. And the whole world is anticipating that although at this moment, the most economically feasible hydrogen is still gray, but we are anticipating and we believe that the hydrogen economy, since a lot of countries, a lot of governments are supporting it, a lot of investors are supporting it, we will anticipate that it will be even a faster journey than the solar power technology. And I think it will be a very good starting point for us to consider whether we are going to adopt more and more hydrogen applications in Hong Kong.
Right. Agree. And then obviously renewables or hydrogens, no matter it's green or gray, it would be spending it would be taking a lot of investments, and also trying to afford that to make it really happening upcoming in Hong Kong and also in China, etc. So we have a banker sitting with us as well, because traditionally or conventionally in a lot of markets, not only in Hong Kong but also overseas market, banking sectors has been putting a lot of investments on the fossil fuels market. So how does the bank navigate the financial risk associated with their previous investments or current investments, and how are you going to manage the potential stranded assets upcoming?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, look, our balance sheet is a reflection of the economy that we have today, right? Which was built with fossil fuels and traditional energy for many decades. But at the same time, we have our customers here with ambitious transition plans, which we need to support, right? And that's why that it's important that in some ways, I talked about our net zero transition plan, and yes, it's okay, I can say it's great, but in reality, it's an aggregate of our clients' plans. We only succeed if they succeed in some ways, right? If they can reach their goals, 2030, 2035, 2050, then, we should be able to reflect that, right? So everything that Jim and Jasper described in terms of what they need to do, the deployment of hydrogen, of grid infrastructure, of renewables, of gas, et cetera, all of these things require investment and financing. And we need to do that. And of course, I think it's probably simple in that sort of high level, but in reality, it is a continuous conversation and engagement. And I think the one point I want to highlight is that there is a lot of pressure on banks, right, to raise ambition, and especially to say, well, we should stop financing fossil fuels and these things. And yes, we have put in policies in place to sort of shift our way away from that, obviously, right? When we take a science-based approach to align our approach. But at the same time, we have to say it's very important that we don't just have what we call a paper transition, that we somehow just clean our balance sheet. We have to actually help some of our most energy-intensive clients transition as well, because ultimately that's where we'll have the positive impact on the economy, and in turn, their clients, going down the value chain, will also benefit from that as well, right? That's how we sort of see the impact on the real economy.
Right. I really like the way that you mentioned about you only succeed when they succeed. So this is a really important point about the collaborations between partners, between the banking, between the government, between the business partners sitting here with us as well. So I think the second concern about the regions is really about the price, and also about particularly on the energy price. I would like to turn to Jim again, and also Jasper, Justin again, because you both has been looking after the energy sectors, and then you have been supplying different kind of fuels to our customers, including the business partners. So how do you plan to balance the lead of the reliable net zero energy supply, and also the customer acceptance of the electricity price in our futures?
That's probably the most difficult question I'm going to get asked today, particularly by people in the room as well as actually on the stage. Look, I've only got 5 fingers, so I'll make 5 quick points, okay? Number one, some of these investments are going to be depreciated over the very longer term. So typically, if you build a new transmission line, it may have a lifetime of 60 years. So we can spread the cost over a period of time. Secondly, can we reuse our existing assets for that new target of lower or zero hydrogen. Diane mentioned the upgrade of our CETS, our clean energy transmission system to the mainland. We can restring it, use the same towers, we can bring in more zero carbon energy over it. Our CCGTs, our combined cycle gas turbines at Black Point, we can already run blends of hydrogen and natural gas. If I need to run 100% hydrogen in the future, if I can get the zero carbon hydrogen at the right price, then actually converting is a lot cheaper than building a new plant. So I can do it over the longer term, I can repurpose assets. The second thing is, can I actually help my customers use energy more wisely? With smart meters, for example, apps on the phone, can I get them to use a bit less? Because that saves carbon today, never mind tomorrow. Can I get my customers to think about the way in which they use energy? So you've heard various numbers this morning. You've heard 0.5 kilograms of carbon per kilowatt hour. You've heard 0.2, you've heard 0.1. But actually, that's the input. What value do you get from that number? An electric motor in a car is very, very efficient. A fuel cell, less. An internal combustion engine, even less. If you take a boiler or you take a wok, a lot of the heat will go perhaps into places other than into the water. But electricity has a more efficient end-use footprint. So think about not just the input, but what you get back from that in terms of the whole chain. Can you use less energy, whether it comes from oil, diesel, gas, hydrogen, electricity? Can you use it in a more efficient way? That's really, really something we can all do today. And I guess the last point is, look, this is just between us in the room. Yeah, we're not going to share this with anybody.
Sure,
we're not being recorded.
Close
Nobody will say anything.
The door. Okay.
Pricing. You can get at the numbers anyway if you go through the sustainability report and our annual report. So for CLP, our unit cost for generation for gas last year, roughly 80 cents. The unit cost generation for nuclear from Daya Bay, roughly 60 cents. No carbon penalty. If we do this in the right way, we work with partners in the right way, you talked about the opportunities, David, coming up in Guangdong, we might be able to get ourselves a pretty reasonable deal. I'll say no more.
Great, great. Justin, would you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm really happy that Jim took the question first. I guess I would just add maybe one or 2 points, right, to what Jim is saying. One, I think we need to sort of think a little more sophisticatedly about this question of, well, there's some trade-off between price and being clean, and et cetera. Of course, there is an investment that's needed, right? I think that one of the points that Jim has made is, a lot of these new technologies, whether it's renewable energy or hydrogen or electric vehicles, there's a higher upfront cost. So this idea that if you buy an electric car, and certainly it is a lot more efficient than a internal combustion engine vehicle, right? A lot less wasted energy in the heat. But the upfront cost of it is going to be probably higher than than a conventional vehicle today. But over time, you're basically, I think electricity is a lot cheaper than gas, right, in Hong Kong. I don't know what the numbers are, but than petrol. You will save more. The more you drive, the more you save. But there's that upfront cost initially, right? So it is about this idea of, okay, there's a bit more of an upfront cost when it's grids or other things that on investment that you need to make. But over time, as we use it, it goes down. And then the second point I think Jim was also making is that, how do we align the incentives, right? How do we align sort of decarbonization with just good business sense, good economic sense? And that's where energy efficiency and savings come in, right? If you're able to, again, invest a bit more upfront, and there's maybe financial products that can help you take away some of that, or policies to help that, but invest a bit more upfront, but over the long run, you save a bit more on your electricity use, your gas use, or other things. There's a benefit to you as a business, as a consumer as well, right? So how do we align these together, I think, is what we need to think about.
Right. So because I think this question is critical when we are trying to review overseas experience as well, that should be taken into considerations. Justin, anything that you think good example or from overseas experience that you can share with us about the pricing concerns overseas or Hong Kong that could actually potentially be addressed?
Well,
I need this. I am pretty loud, but I don't think I could get some of you in the back, so I will grab the microphone. Yeah, well, there are trade-offs, right? You have to decide what's more important. And I know that most of the companies that are driving this forward, whether it's from the financing side or whether you're building and owning the assets, that you are shareholder run, right? You have a mandate to do right by your shareholders and to do right by your profit pursuit. It's going to be a little bit slower the more you are constrained by that. It's just true, right? And the more freedom that you have to pursue, to prioritize the energy transition, and I'm not going to say take away the pursuit of profit for your shareholders, because you can't, of course, but that you might be willing to take slight haircuts on what's possible or what's not possible. When we look at what's going on, for example, up in the mainland, with companies that used to build projects because they thought they could get 8% or 10% or 12% return on investment, and now they're getting 6.5% or 7% on those projects. And you know what? That's the calculus that they've had to make themselves comfortable with in order to make that happen, right? I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case, always, that it has to be like that. And I know I'm in Hong Kong, right? And I'm telling people that they're going to have to make less money, and that's never going to be nice to hear, but that's sometimes the way it does go, right? That you prioritize slightly one thing over another thing, but also with the expectation that over time, as you get better, as you squeeze more efficiency out of the process, as you just get so much better at doing it, that those problems start to fix themselves a little bit. That 10 years ago, it didn't make sense to build a solar plant without a boatload of subsidies, and now it does. That 10 years ago, it didn't make sense to do a whole bunch of things in renewable energy without a lot of support and a lot of people willing to accept a little bit less on their bottom lines until the problem kind of fixed itself. It fixed itself with a lot of support and a lot of energy and a lot of hard work, but it did sort itself out in the end when we talk about generation costs for solar or for wind or for the price of lithium that goes into storage, right? Those problems have started to fix themselves. And so I have confidence that if there's a little bit of a sacrifice that happens in the short run, that over the medium and long run, you have your cake and you eat it too. You actually sort out those price trade-offs, and then you get to where you wanted to be in the end anyway.
Right.
Can I
Jasper,
add a
yes,
point?
please.
Yeah.
I can see you holding the mic.
I just want to give an example. Town Gas has been investing in the mainland China over the last few years, especially on renewable energy. So for now, up to the end of last year, for now we have 1.8 gigawatts of distributed solar panels installed on the customer's rooftop. So if you have a warehouse, if you have a factory in mainland China, we can pay the price to build a solar panel on your rooftop and then sell the power at a discount of the grid price. So it's not always a trade-off. You can, at the same time, enjoy the green power and then enjoy an even cheaper power price. But of course, that was in mainland China. And yesterday, we have the AGM of our subsidiary who is very dedicated in this business. And I think it's good to say now that we are very happy. Starting from last year, this business is actually generating income and revenue back to the group. So it is a workable business model for both investors or even for the users of power. Just a point to add.
Right. I think we all agree right now we're at the stage during a transformations, not only about the energy sectors, but more importantly, maybe on the investments, putting more investments on the transitioning and also transformations of the technologies, because we mentioned about the efficiencies, we mentioned about the maturities of the technologies. So I think you also share about some of the figures about the global landscape for investing more money on different kind of renewable energy as well. I have figures on me as well, because when we talk about the climate technologies, the climate equities within the private market, we also observe from Invest.com, we observe about from the US 75 billions. We are talking about only 75 billions US dollar in 2019. but we already experiencing about US dollars 196 billion in 2022. So we can see there's a big jump of the private equity market has been investing more on the climate technologies. And then obviously of the recently announced budget, we can also trying to, because of the global economies of pursuing the carbon neutralities, we observe the green transformations will be creating different kind of business opportunities and also financial leads. So Invest Hong Kong has been working with the different partners, including the park, Hong Kong Science Park, Cyberport, and also the business partners, like the power companies, and particularly with the Business Environment Council as well. So I think this is a really important factors about the investments of the climate technologies, because we see the opportunities is upcoming. So I would like to spend about the last 5 minutes talk about the investment on these areas. And I understand Jasper and also Jim, you both at the companies, you have the investment arm, really looking into different new solutions, new technologies, and what kind of solutions you can take on board on transitioning your infrastructures, etc. So what kind of technologies right now or new energies right now you are actively looking for? And then also anything or any insights that you could share with us about the upcoming futures of the technology side.
Okay, another quite expansive question. Let me try and be be fairly brief.
You have 2 minutes, okay?
Okay, so number one, nuclear. There are new technologies in nuclear. China has the Hualong 3 technology, very safe, very reliable. That's a new technology which is now becoming current across the mainland. If we're to bring in large volumes of power into Hong Kong, and Hong Kong government's already reserved a site at Chung Kwan O Area 132 for that, likely it will be high voltage direct current transmission lines, which China is best at the world at by far, but that's something that will be new for Hong Kong. PV panels, the technology is moving forward, the efficiency is going up, but actually generally across the whole place you can see that there are efficiencies in end-use applications too, in gas appliances, in electric appliances, in vehicles. New standards are coming across the world, so there's lots, I think, to look forward to. Just one final point in terms of capital investment and so on. As I said earlier on, there are significant investments needed. They will be depreciated over the longer term. One of the real benefits for us is that we have the scheme of control agreement. That's on a long-term basis. So it's not like we have to price again for investment every year. Should we invest, should we not invest? What's the regulatory output? We've got 2033, almost to 2035, so we've got some degree of certainty to work with government and make sure this happens.
Okay. Jasper?
Actually, if you read the news, you'll find that Town Gas has been organizing a $1 million USD award every year for energy technologies. So in the last few years, we have awarded it, like for the champion of these awards, most of them are focusing on the energy storage. We had one project awarded for the liquid battery. And actually Town Gas, the Henderson Group has also a battery company named Enervenue, which focuses on very high efficiency new technology batteries. The plant is just being set up in mainland China for now. We are also finding ways or technologies to reduce to increase energy efficiency. Like last year, the winner was actually from the i2Cool, a reflective painting that reduces aircon power usage. And for the award that was given out last month, it was actually about hydrogen. I think Jim at the very beginning mentioned that why don't we just use power from the grid and do electrolysis to come up with hydrogen or from green power, because it's not feasible for this time, at this time being, because the efficiency is still very low. The award winner this year was actually focusing on how to do it in a much more efficient way. So the award itself was we are aiming to absorb some newest technologies from the university side or from the entrepreneur side, and then absorb it into Town Gas. And because we have over 700 companies in the mainland China focusing on all different kind of sectors, we are hoping to provide an adoption or application scenario for this new technology so that we can partner and put laboratory researchers into real place and give it a try. That's all for now.
I see. So I always would like to bring in from the banker perspective, particularly from Justin's, because you have been looking after really about the overseas market and also investments and also capitals. Could you share with us just a few words what kind of observations that regarding energy projects in Hong Kong or overseas that would be basically require more capitals, and where do you see the most opportunities in climate technologies? Do you think what they share is aligning with your observation as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with what both Jasper and Jim were saying on this, but I think climate tech is very important to us. It's one of our third pillars of our sort of approach, right? And we have a number of partnerships as well, both commercial and philanthropic, which looks at climate tech, various things. I think I'll just mention that there's a wide array of different things, and I think one of the most important ones is how do we make them actually commercially viable and scale them, right? So I think there are technologies on the supply side, energy supply side, on the demand side, on digital side, all sorts, right? But how do you make sure that we can scale this, and that's something that I think is really important. And I think the hope is that we can take some of these climate tech companies, which are a bit more nascent, partner them with our more established clients in some ways, and then see whether through these partnerships we can help scale some of these technologies.
Yes. I think your point about scaling up and also commercialization is really important for moving forward for our new energies, and also the net zero carbon energies is really important not only in Hong Kong, but how can we trying to make it strategically important for putting resources and also the time and also the talent in these areas would be very important factors for us to moving forward. Last but not least, I just would like to ask about our panelists for moving forward, because it seems like right now we're at a stage that very optimistic, but also very ambitious, because we have very strict target we have to hit, and then we also have very strong effort from our power companies trying to make that happen. We have banker perspective that the money is really going inside on this area. But in terms of moving forward, David, could you talk about what kind of energy market that you think for a more diverse zero carbon energy market you think that is ideal, and then how can we wrap up their developments in Hong Kong and also regions?
Sure, and I'll try to be very brief, as I understand we're going slightly over. Look, Hong Kong's a small market, right? It's a very compact place, and it's a small market, and it's just going to make the most sense to keep serving Hong Kong in a certain way, much the same way that it has been served already, with the CLP and the Hong Kong Electric and the town gas driving that internally. Because you're the right players to be driving that. I don't think we're going to be establishing something along the lines of competitive markets or anything like that. It just doesn't make much sense for what we have here. So instead, it's counting on the responsible kind of designated bodies to be doing not just, going out to 2035. It's not easy, but it's certainly the low-hanging fruit of this whole energy transition, right? Swapping coal for gas, okay, that's very good, but it's obvious, right? Building some nearshore solar on reservoirs, Plover Cove, right? This is the easy, low-hanging fruit kind of stuff in this transition. And then what happens after 2035 gets really murky, right? Something's gonna get different. Either green hydrogen is going to become very scalable and economic, or maybe carbon capture is going to become scalable or economic, or maybe something that we don't even know yet is going to emerge and solve all our problems for us. And it's probably going to be solved actually with a lot of forward-thinking investment and a lot of hard work and a bunch of really smart people in laboratories with PhDs doing materials testing and science. And by 2035, hopefully we figured something out. by the time we've sorted out all of our low-hanging fruit. And so I hope that the parties that are responsible here in Hong Kong that are entrusted with this responsibility are doing the work right now so that there's also a solution for 2035 to 2050.
Talking about the hydrogens, because Diane also mentioned about the government will soon announce the hydrogen development plan in Hong Kong. And then Jasper, because from your perspective, you must be having a lot of recommendations or suggestions or your ambitions for Hong Kong having more green hydrogens or hydrogens roadmap in Hong Kong. Do you have any recommendations?
Just try it. But then there are a lot of hydrogen applications that, of course, Diane mentioned some of them. And I would just give one advice or suggestions to the people here. When we are considering for changing some kind of infrastructure or energy-intensive applications, it is very important to consider its life cycle emissions. Saying that through the design life of 6 to 15 years, how much carbon will be emitted in the coming decade. And it is important to consider the roadmaps of different energy providers in Hong Kong as well. When you put that in mind, I'm sure that it will give you a much clearer picture on which kind of applications should use which kind of energy. That's all.
Brilliant, brilliant. We're going to close this panel, but because Jim, you're here, any last word about the energy market, future energy fuel mix, please.
Okay, we've talked a lot about 2035 and 2050. I don't know what position the climate's going to be in by 2035, but if we sit and wait for everything to happen in 2035, it might be too late. So we need to do something today. So don't forget, think about the end-to-end energy process today. Think about user behavior. I came here this morning by walking in the MTR. How can we set an example in our own lives, in our own business lives? How can we actually do more to save energy, whatever form of energy, today? That'll buy us time for fixing the underlying issues, hopefully, by 2035 and 2050.
That's a really right word. Sorry for the delayed, but Simon and also Merlin, please forgive me because I would like to really invite our participants today because this is energy transition is really, really important and timely topic for Hong Kong. Do you have any questions that you would like to challenge our panelists, please? Yeah, anyone please pass the mic to our participants. We have about 5 minutes, so we will take about 3 questions at most.
Okay, yeah, Peter from Airport Authorities. I hear Jim and Jasper mentioning about transition to net zero energy productions, and hydrogen is one of the key elements that you have to be considering. So, but I think by hydrogen we're not talking about zero carbon hydrogen. So how confident are you to be able to accessible to affordable zero carbon hydrogen?
Jim?
You've been reading the Financial Times, haven't you? You probably saw the article about 10 days ago. There is some concern in the market about whether real zero carbon hydrogen will be available to meet the world's needs in enough volume, in time, at a reasonable price. Okay. So that is an issue that people are looking at the moment. Production's been a bit slow to come on stream with enough. If CLP uses green hydrogen in its power plants, for local generation, we will burn more hydrogen than the rest of Hong Kong combined. So I am looking at it very, very carefully. But we also have to think about other options. Now, David, you mentioned CCS. If anybody can crack that, the mainland can. There's a lot of work going on now, particularly in academic centres, engineering centres, but also in Guangdong. There's some work going on now. So we're across that. We're watching that very carefully. Because we have plants at Black Point that could use hydrogen or natural gas, we have some optionality. Justin.
Can I? Oh, sorry, Justin.
Oh, this is really provoking questions.
All right.
Everyone would like to answer that.
No. Just to add 2 points. First one is it really depends on the scale. Some kind of green hydrogen projects in Hong Kong is already underway as far as I understand. The The second part is that Tongas is not only relying on the supply of green hydrogen from the outside world, from other countries. Tongas also has a lot of different green energy productions in mainland China. One of them is the production of green methanol. For chemical engineers here, I'm sure you will know that green methanol is easily convertible to green hydrogen. This is one of the ways where we can produce green hydrogen from our own assets or production plants ourselves. So we are not only just sitting here and then having good mind and expect that one day green hydrogen will be cheap. We are also developing the production arm for green fuels, including green hydrogen. That's the point I wanted.
Justin?
Just quickly add, actually, I didn't read the Financial Times article, so I'm sorry. But actually, a lot of our customers today we're speaking to have quite ambitious plans to produce both green and blue hydrogen. Actually, more supply, potential supply than demand, frankly. And actually, one of the challenges is actually, while banking, these sort of ambitious plans requires an offtake agreement, which means demand. So actually, there is. It's probably a chicken and egg issue, but there is a lot of ambitious plans for supply. Cost is another matter, right? Of course, I think initially all that will cost quite a bit. But if you, like other technologies, if you scale the supply and if you have enough offtake, sort of, secure long-term offtake that's bankable, that cost will come down.
Thank you, Justin. Second questions, please. Okay.
I got the mic. Thank you. Edwin now from the Green Earth. Jim mentioned that end-to-end and then about demand side. I pick up these 2 points and said, lady sits next to me, complained that the indoor temperature is a bit too cold. So demand side, we should practice what we preach to raise the temperature a bit to save energy. The other thing is, I think you mentioned nuclear power from mainland China. This is an easier way out. But you talk about end-to-end, we must acknowledge and realize how to treat
Edwin,
the nuclear waste.
Because of the time, what is your questions?
The question is whether we purely looking at nuclear energy rather than you think out of the box, you think of those that we do not need to burn or to chemically process it, but Hong Kong is surrounded by waters. We always have water currents, wave. Can we put more resources to investigate whether there are potential of green energy, zero carbon energy for our consumption? Thank you.
Just very quickly on wave, and tidal is another one associated with that. If you've been to Star Ferry Piers, you can see the tide range in Hong Kong. It's not very great. Tidal energy probably is not going to create a lot of opportunities here. Edwin, if you're a surfer, the only time you can go to Sheko and actually get a reasonable ride is just before the typhoon comes, and that's going to play havoc with our equipment if we run it. So not easy, but I do agree in terms of end-to-end, be it hydrogen production, be it nuclear energy, be it RE or whatever else, we have to think about the whole value chain. I think that's a sensible point.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Edwin, for the very good questions. Just one last and quick questions, please.
Hi, Eileen from Modern Thermos. I just recently heard from someone from a investment company, and one of the shareholders is a power company in mainland China. And they told me that there's an oversupply of green electricity in mainland China from renewable sources. And they are looking at whether it's possible to turn it into hydrogen or ammonia, that kind of thing. I'd just like to see any insight on this. Is it true? Yeah, that's the question.
Okay, great. Any oversupply?
Hey,
Please.
I think that's a question for me. Right, there's regional oversupply, of course. China's massive, and they've got provinces so far from each other that you can have power undersupply in Shandong, and you can have a massive oversupply in Gansu at the same time. UHV DC lines help with that to some extent. But yeah, it is very possible for parts of China to have regional oversupply at certain times of the day. Whether or not that oversupply is persistent enough, its duration is long enough and forecastable enough to invest in something like carbon capture from the air or green electrolysis remains to be seen, really. If you can fix, look at Shandong, right? Shandong is so oversupplied with solar power in the middle of the day that power prices are negative. But that's for 3 hours, right? Can we take advantage of 3 hours of super cheap green electricity in the middle of the day in Shandong? Is that going to stay for 15 or 20 years? Can we get our return on investment on whatever we build to use that super cheap green electricity in the middle of the day? I don't know. And I think that's what a lot of investors don't know either. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, it's oversupplied. How long will it be oversupplied? And can we still take advantage of it for that long?
Thank you, David. So thank you so much for our panelists because today is really bringing a lot of insight, not only about the current situations, but really about moving forward, what kind of investment, what kind of opportunities in these areas, and also the challenges, problems that we have to face upcoming in Hong Kong and also in China market, and more importantly, about the collaborations between the regions and also between our partners. So with that, I would like to thank, and also please join me to give a round of applause to thank our panelists for this brilliant sharing. Thank you.